There is an unlived life waiting beneath the layers of who you were told you should be, a self still and whole, buried under the dust of performed roles, inherited limits you mistook for your own borders, and the quiet weight of old stories. Your stagnation is not a symptom of weakness. It is the inevitable result of carrying outdated beliefs, unhealed wounds, and versions of you that expired seasons ago. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not found by adding, but by a courageous descent, a journey into the forgotten rooms of your own psyche to face the memories you avoid and the shadows you were warned not to touch. This is a process of subtraction, of dismantling, piece by piece, the invisible architecture that keeps you from your own truth. And if you wish to live a life that feels authentically, undeniably yours, you must begin with the most difficult task of all, releasing what has been holding you in place, silently, every single day. In this film, I will walk you through 10 things you must learn to gently set down if you are to enter a new chapter, one defined by honesty, spaciousness, and a profound alignment with your essence. This is not a mere checklist for self-improvement. It is a guided unraveling of the unconscious frameworks that have confined you for years. So before we go further, I want you to ask yourself a vital question. If you carry every burden you feel today into the next 3 years, how much will your life have truly changed? If the answer is very little, then you are in exactly the right place, because this journey of release doesn't just alter your circumstances, it returns you to the person you were before the world began to whisper its expectations. Number 1, your allegiance to a former self. There are days you feel an invisible hand pulling you backward into reactions and feelings you thought you'd outgrown. This is not a flaw in your character or a sign of insufficient willpower. It happens because a prior incarnation of you still lives within, a self you have not yet had the courage to honorfully release. Jung spoke of these as identity clusters, dense knots of memory, belief, and emotion, so deeply woven into your fabric they feel like you, long after their purpose has ended. You believe you are making conscious choices, but often you are replaying survival programs written by a younger person who was once afraid, unseen, or conditioned to make themselves small to remain safe. If you observe closely, you will notice many of your present behaviors do not belong to the adult you are now. You hesitate to voice a valuable opinion in a room, not because of the current conversation, but because an old memory echoes, a time when speaking led to ridicule. You deflect a genuine compliment, as if warmth and recognition are threats. You are responding from the memory of who you were, not from the awareness of who you are. Picture this former self as an old coat worn for years through every storm. It kept you dry, it provided comfort, but now it is heavy, threadbare, and restricts your movement. The coat is not your adversary. It simply no longer fits the journey ahead, and there will come a moment when you must, with your own hands, unbutton it and let it fall. Allegiance to an outdated identity creates a silent war within. You crave growth, yet you are the one quietly reinforcing the walls. Jung explained that the unconscious mind is not concerned with your aspirations. It seeks the familiar, for the familiar equals survival. The unknown equals risk. So it pulls you back to old stories, old emotional reflexes, even as they constrict your breath. It is like holding on to a map of a city you no longer live in. You keep consulting it, even though every street has changed. So I want you to pause here for just one breath. Ask yourself, these old protections, these reflexive fears, these roles I learned to play, are they still serving me, or are they simply keeping me contained? And if I were to set them down now, what kind of life, what version of myself might finally have room to emerge? This loyalty to a ghost of yourself prevents you from ever touching the core of your being. It traps you in a familiar emotional climate while slowly draining your vitality. Jung believed the soul has a natural direction toward expansion, toward light. Stagnation is not your nature. It is the consequence of clinging to a shape you have outgrown. That feeling of suffocation, it may be because you are trying to inhabit a shell you've already broken. Liberation begins not with a giant leap, but with a quiet acknowledgement. I am no longer that person. And this is not a betrayal of your past. It is the ultimate act of fidelity to your present. Number 2. The pattern of self-interruption. Your attachment to an old self keeps you anchored, but there exists a subtler, more insidious force. It doesn't pull you backward into yesterday. It undermines you the very moment tomorrow begins to brighten. This is the pattern of self-interruption, the invisible presence that arrives precisely when you are poised to step into a new chapter of your life. Self-interruption does not stem from a lack of desire. It is the unconscious defending its known territory, choosing the familiar ache over the unfamiliar joy. Jung observed, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. We do not run from potential failure. We run because genuine growth demands we confront the parts of ourselves we've kept in the dark. Watch carefully, and you will see this pattern. You abandon a project just as it gains momentum. When a meaningful opportunity appears, you devise a perfectly reasonable excuse to let it pass. When offered real kindness, you meet it with suspicion, not openness. This does not happen because you don't want better. It happens because a voice within whispers, to go further means leaving behind the only safety you've ever known. Self-interruption is like a muscle, long accustomed to bracing, being asked to relax. The tremor you feel is not a sign you are wrong. It is the psyche adjusting to a posture it has never practiced. Human beings do not fear the dark. They fear the moment a light is switched on, illuminating corners they've spent a lifetime avoiding. Some people become so accustomed to conditional love, to emotional unpredictability, that when they encounter consistency and patience, it feels unsettling. The peace triggers alarm in a nervous system wired for storms. The unconscious murmurs, "This landscape is unrecognizable." And so they withdraw, not from a lack of wanting love, but from a lack of familiarity with being loved steadily. Jung termed this the psyche's resistance to its own expansion. When the survival instinct misinterprets change as danger, it generates just enough internal chaos to pull you back into the old rhythm. The danger is this: self-interruption is quiet. It disguises itself as rationality, prudence, or even humility. It uses your own inner voice to persuade you. And each time it succeeds, you trust yourself a little less. To dissolve this cycle, you do not need more discipline. You need more discernment, the ability to notice the exact moment the old script begins to run. Awareness is the sword that cuts the unconscious knot. And when you choose to move forward, even with your heart pounding, you begin to rewrite the code. Number 3, relationships that consume your light. Yet sometimes the root of your weariness is not inside you at all. It flows from connections that feel familiar, but which, drop by drop, drain your inner light. The next step, then, is to learn to recognize these bonds and to find the strength to walk away when necessary. Not every person who crosses your path brings nourishment. Some enter with open arms, yet carry a bottomless need. Some speak your name with affection, but somehow leave you feeling smaller each time you part. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But not every transformation leads you toward a truer self. Some relationships do not help you grow. They erode you day after quiet day. You may not notice it at first. You simply feel heavier after a call. Even when no overt conflict occurred, you find yourself choosing words with care, managing moods, maintaining peace as if you are carrying a second emotional gravity. Then one day you understand. You are not tired because you are inadequate. You are tired because you have been living for two. Some people deplete you in elegant, silent ways. They do not shout. They do not explicitly demand. They simply allow you to hold their emotional world, as if your purpose in their life is to be their anchor. For instance, in a circle of friends, there may be one who seeks you only in crisis, yet is absent when you need a listening ear. You become the steady shore they return to in every storm, but they never ask if the tide is wearing you away. If you are brave enough to answer a direct question, ask yourself, in this dynamic, who have I been? If you wish, you can share that small, honest realization in the comments below. It can be the first act of seeing yourself clearly. Light-consuming relationships often begin with compassion. You believe they need you. You believe you are helping. But in truth, you are slowly vanishing to keep them upright. Jung proposed that what we attract in relationships often mirrors our unconscious beliefs. If you consistently find yourself with those who take more than they give, it may be because, deep within, a part of you still feels deserving only of fragments of care. These old beliefs make you endure what you should have released long ago. These connections do not just cost you time. They cost you your sense of worth. They mute your inner voice, replacing it with a sigh you learn to hide. And most dangerously, They acclimate you to emotional scarcity until you forget that real connection should leave you energized, not exhausted. Look honestly at the relationships where you must make yourself smaller, apologize for your needs, or hold all the pieces together. You are not placed on this earth to mend every broken soul. Your purpose is not to be a permanent shelter for others. If that shelter collapses every time you try to stand in your own light, what is required is not to abandon everyone, but to recognize a sacred truth. Your energy is finite. Guarding it is a profound responsibility to your own life. A life-giving relationship makes you expand, not contract. It offers space for your growth, not just burdens for you to carry. It encourages your flame to burn brighter, not to dim it for another's comfort. And when you step away from what depletes you, you create a vacancy, a space where healthier connections can finally find you. Just as a vessel can only receive fresh water once it is emptied of the stale. Number 4, the compulsion to be embraced. Relationships that consume your light wear you down from the outside in, but there exists an even more intimate exhaustion. The fatigue that comes from erasing yourself in exchange for the acceptance of others. The yearning to be loved, to belong, is fundamentally human. But when that yearning becomes a compulsion, you begin to trade your inner truth for a likeness you believe will be easier for the world to hold. Jung called this the persona, the social mask we craft to fit in. The tragedy is, the more polished that mask becomes, the further your authentic self retreats into shadow. You will notice yourself agreeing when you want to dissent, smiling when your spirit is heavy, performing wellness when you are quietly breaking, all to preserve an image of agreeability, pleasantness, and effortless strength. But the approval you receive is not for you. It is for the performance you have painstakingly rehearsed. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Our deepest fear is not others' criticism, but confronting the parts of ourselves we secretly deem unworthy of love. That very sense of not enough is the fuel for the compulsion to be embraced. Every compliment becomes a temporary salve for an inner emptiness, but the relief never lasts. So you perform more, strive harder, stretch thinner, all to sustain a fragile sense of value. Someone from our community once shared her story. She was, by all accounts, a consummate people-pleaser. At her work, she habitually accepted tasks outside her role, stayed late to cover for colleagues, and could never say no, driven by a fear of being disliked or perceived as difficult. She lived as a mirror, forever reflecting others' expectations. And the cruel irony was, the more she tried to please, the more invisible she became to herself. She lost touch with her own desires, until one evening, well past midnight, She was still at her desk, finishing a report that wasn't hers. Her body trembled with exhaustion, her vision blurred, her head throbbed, and her hands wanted to push the keyboard away. And in that precise, silent moment, she realized she was draining her own well dry by repeatedly betraying her own limits. She sat in the office, accompanied only by the hum of the computer, and for the first time in years, she wept. Awakening often arrives this quietly, through the decision to finally look at your own depletion and acknowledge that it is not normal, through the recognition that if you continue on this path, you will one day disappear from your own life without a sound. The compulsion to be embraced warps your boundaries. You assume responsibility for the emotions of others while abandoning your own. You endlessly sand down your edges to fit into whatever space is offered, like a stone worn smooth by a relentless river. But a stone that is forever worn down eventually loses its unique form. Jung taught that we only begin to truly live when we are brave enough to exchange temporary approval for lasting integrity. Because if the acceptance you receive is based on a version of you that is not real, then that love was never meant for you. It belongs to the character you are straining to portray. And the greater the distance between your essence and your persona, the more your soul thirsts. Freeing yourself from this compulsion is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about granting yourself permission to be imperfect, to occasionally disappoint, to say no, to be wrong, to be different. It is reclaiming the energy you invested in the mask and returning it to your authentic core. Only when you dare to measure your worth by an inner compass and not by the external applause can you truly begin to breathe. Because the acceptance that matters most never arrives from outside. It dawns in the moment you finally turn inward and meet your own gaze. Number 5. The demand for a complete map. Some people cannot begin a journey unless they can see every turn of the path ahead. They delay, waiting to understand step 10, while step 1 lies clear and attainable at their feet. They tell themselves this is prudence, foresight, intelligent planning. But beneath that rational surface stirs a primal anxiety, the fear of stepping into territory the psyche has not yet charted. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you demand absolute certainty, you are allowing the unconscious, with its storehouse of old wounds and memories, to steer you. The need for total control often masquerades as thorough preparation, but what it truly seeks is to keep you within the known. You analyze, you calculate, you envision every possible scenario. Yet the more you think, the more anxious you become. The more you prepare, the more unprepared you feel. This endless preparation is not a runway for action. It is procrastination, dignified by intellect. The truth is, no one is given a complete map of their life. The map is drawn as you walk, but those obsessed with certainty believe the opposite. They want the full chart in hand before taking a single step. They want every line precise, every outcome predictable. But life does not unfold like a solvable equation. It flows like a river. It moves when you move, and the way reveals itself only when you dare to step into the current. This demand for a guaranteed outcome is also a defense mechanism forged in earlier pain. If you once made a choice that led to significant hurt, your unconscious recorded the event. It now magnifies risk, convincing you that every new step is perilous. But the unconscious cannot distinguish between a true threat and an imagined one. It only knows how to sound the alarm. And so, instead of living, you spend your days rehearsing catastrophe in your mind, constructing 100 tragic scenarios, 99 of which will never come to pass. Imagine standing before a door, slightly ajar, with light spilling from the crack. Instead of pushing it open to see, you sit down and begin to imagine what might be wrong with the room. What if it's empty? What if it's not what I hoped? You speculate until you forget that the only way to know is to enter. Jung emphasized that the inner journey offers no guarantees of clarity beforehand. It promises growth through entering the unknown, where you cannot predict or control the outcome. Clarity comes not from standing still in analysis, but from a single, decisive motion. It is like driving in fog. Your headlights only illuminate the next 50 feet of road, but 50 feet is enough. You drive those 50 feet, and the next 50 appear, and so you travel the entire way. What holds so many back is not a lack of opportunity, but a lack of trust in their own capacity to adapt. They fear that in the unknown, they will be insufficient, weak, or lost. But you do not discover your resilience by staying on shore. You discover it by swimming into the deep water and learning that you can float. If you wait for every answer to appear before you move, you will wait your entire life. Life asks for your presence, and showing up means accepting that some paths must be walked with faith in your own footsteps, not with a guarantee of the destination. What frees you from the demand for a complete map is not perfect information. It is the courage to whisper, "I do not know what awaits, but I choose to begin all the same." If you are still here with me, thank you. Your presence reveals something significant. Somewhere within you, a part has already chosen to move beyond old limitations and toward a life of greater authenticity. I hope you stay until the end, because the principles we have yet to explore may unlock doors you have hesitated to approach. If anything you've heard resonates, leave a small sign, a like, a subscription, so this channel can continue to find you with the insights you need precisely when you need them. The inner work is profound and can feel solitary, but you do not have to walk it alone. We are here together. Number 6. The seductive promise of later. The demand for a complete map keeps you at the starting line, but another force slows your progress just as effectively, though it speaks in a gentler tone. It is the promise everyone has made and the lie we most readily believe. I'll do it later. Later is the soft cushion the unconscious offers whenever you approach something meaningful. It is comforting, reasonable, safe, but the price is exorbitant: time, potential, and the respect you owe your own word. Jung taught, "You are what you do, not what you intend to do." Your identity is shaped by your actions, not by your plans or the nightly promises you whisper to yourself. Life transforms through motion, not through intention. What makes later so perilous is that it sounds so sensible. You're tired, you're busy, you're waiting for the ideal conditions. But in truth, these reasons are rarely the core issue. Procrastination is almost always a form of self-protection, a shield against potential failure, against judgment, against confronting the terrifying possibility that you might be capable and then having to live up to it. Let me share an account from a member of this community. She dreamed of writing a book on solitary reflection. For nearly 2 years, her mantra was, "Next month, soon, when things settle." She purchased beautiful journals, researched publishers, outlined chapters, everything except writing the first page. Every Sunday, she found a new, perfectly logical reason to delay. "I'm not inspired today. I need to read one more book on the craft." And while the dream remained alive in her mind, glowing with potential, her daily reality remained unchanged, because she let action wither inside the harmless-looking husk of tomorrow. The truth is, the more you postpone, the more your mind learns that your desires are not important. Each time you break a promise to yourself, a small light inside you dims, not from a strong wind, but from simple neglect. People often mistake procrastination for laziness, but through a Jungian lens, it is a signal of inner conflict. One part of you strains toward growth, another part clings to the safety of hiding. That tension holds you in stasis, suspended between two poles, and when you cannot choose, you choose the easiest option: to do nothing. Later also sells the illusion of infinite time. You believe you have endless days to do what matters. In reality, the days you have are far fewer than you imagine. Procrastination doesn't just delay dreams, it buries the moments in which you could have become more of who you are. The remedy is not sudden, harsh discipline. The remedy is facing a question we all avoid. If I do not do this today, what will my life look like 1 year from now? If the answer is identical, then you already know what is being interred: your potential, your vitality, your unlived life. Number 7. The fantasy that achievement will mend you. But even when you stop delaying and start to move, another, more subtle trap lies ahead. It doesn't hold you still like procrastination does. It propels you to run faster, harder. It is the fantasy that external achievement can heal your internal world. Many believe that with enough success, more wealth, higher status, greater recognition, their inner wounds will simply dissolve. They imagine that upon reaching a certain summit, their insecurities, fears, and feelings of emptiness will be left behind in the valley. But Jung offered a counterpoint. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Achievement can bring you to a new address, but it cannot replace the mirror in which you see yourself each morning. If in that reflection you still see someone who fundamentally doubts their worth, then no matter how grand the stage you stand upon, the hollowness follows you like a silent companion. Success does not heal you. It amplifies the wounds you have tried to bury. When you use accomplishment to cover your pain, you engage in a double deception. You run at high speed to avoid facing yourself, and you place your hope for wholeness in something that was never designed to provide it. Consequently, the higher you climb, the more acute the fear of falling becomes. You accumulate more, yet feel not enough more frequently. You receive more praise, yet grow more fragile in the face of any criticism. It is like constructing a magnificent house upon unsettled earth. It appears flawless until the first tremor reveals every fissure beneath. Many use relentless busyness as an anesthetic. They work incessantly to avoid the silence of sitting with themselves. They call it ambition, dedication, drive, but in truth, it is a sophisticated escape from the reality that their soul has been calling for attention. And what of you? Are you tirelessly pursuing an external horizon, while the part of you that most needs care is left waiting in the dust? If you feel moved to, you can acknowledge it in the comments. It can be the start of a compassionate inner dialogue. Jung believed that what we do not confront internally will manifest as external fate. Success may bring admiration, but it will also spotlight your fear of rejection more brightly than ever. It may elevate you, but it will make any fall more devastating if you do not know who you are when the crowd disperses and you are left alone with yourself. The profound sadness is this: many finally arrive at their dreamed-of destination, only to discover that peace does not reside there, because they brought with them a soul that had never been tended. And that soul, no matter the scenery, will always find a way to speak its truth. There is only one way to free yourself from this illusion: to pause long enough to listen to that inner voice, to look directly into the shadows you avoid, and to acknowledge the inner child you left behind long ago. To accept that wholeness is not found at a destination, but in the courageous, ongoing process of turning toward yourself. Number 8. The neglect of your inner child. Every adult houses a child within, not as a metaphor, but as a living psychological reality. Jung saw this as a core archetype, a repository of primal sensitivity, historic wounds, and the profound capacity for renewal at the deepest level of the psyche. The central problem, however, is this: most of us mature by forgetting that child. We close the door to its room, hoping its whispers will fade. But it does not disappear. It simply learns to communicate in more indirect and often more disruptive ways. You witness this in your most ordinary reactions: a disproportionate fear of rejection that makes your stomach clench, or a sudden freeze in the face of mild disapproval. These responses do not belong to your adult self. They emanate from the child within who was once abandoned, dismissed, or forced to become strong too soon. That child still lives within you, attempting to protect you with the only strategies it knows: withdrawal, perfectionism, people-pleasing, or control. Neglecting this inner child allows old wounds to steer your life from the shadows. It influences you to choose incompatible partners, remain in unsupportive environments, fear your own power, or undermine the good that comes to you. Jung proposed that the unhealed aspects of our psyche replay themselves in our lives as a form of destiny, until we gather the courage to look at them with kindness. Many imagine inner child work as a complex, esoteric practice. In reality, it begins with the simplest of gestures: treating yourself as a compassionate adult would treat a hurt child, allowing yourself to feel sadness without self-judgment, saying, "I need rest," instead of pushing past exhaustion, recognizing that your anxiety has a history and choosing not to scorn it, asking, "What are you afraid of?" instead of demanding, "Why are you so weak?" Just like a living child, your inner child does not demand immediate perfection or solutions. It needs only to be witnessed, acknowledged, and assured that you are now an ally, not another critic. When you begin to care for this part of yourself, something remarkable unfolds. You don't just heal the past, you open a future. You become more compassionate, yet not fragile, stronger, yet not rigid, mature, yet not hardened. You cease reacting from old wounds and begin acting from present moment awareness. Number 9. Perfectionism masquerading as excellence. The inner child is wounded whenever we deny our genuine feelings. But there is another mechanism, more cunning, that tricks you into believing you are being diligent when, in reality, you are tightening a constraint around your own potential: perfectionism. Perfection sounds virtuous. It wears the face of high standards, meticulous care, and refined taste. But if you examine its essence, you will see it does not spring from a love of the craft. It arises from a fear of being judged as inadequate. Jung noted, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." Many carry expectations that were never theirs to fulfill, and then unconsciously turn those expectations into a rod with which they measure and punish themselves. Perfectionism does not propel you forward, it paralyzes you, because the mere possibility of producing something imperfect makes you want to retreat entirely. It leads you to edit a piece of writing into oblivion, never releasing it. It convinces you to abandon a creative project because it doesn't match the idealized vision in your mind. It has you criticizing your first attempts as if they should be final masterpieces. To shield your ego from potential shame, you choose not to begin at all. A viewer once shared his struggle with launching a podcast on mindfulness. He recorded several episodes, raw, thoughtful, sincere. But each time he listened back, he deleted the files. His voice wasn't resonant enough. His insights weren't profound enough. His structure wasn't compelling enough. He rewrote scripts endlessly, only to discard them again. 6 months passed without a single published episode. That is the core of perfectionism, a terror of being seen in your inevitable human clumsiness, a fear that others will discover you have flaws, limits, and are a work in progress. But no one reaches genuine mastery without passing through the phase of awkward, imperfect beginnings. Perfectionism also corrupts your understanding of discipline. True discipline means continuing even when the work is imperfect. Perfectionism demands you stop unless it is flawless. One fosters growth. The other assassinates momentum before it can even breathe. Perfectionism pretends to be a noble pursuit, but it is merely a cage that keeps you from ever taking flight. Ask yourself, if you share your creation today and it is imperfect, what truly happens? Does your value evaporate? Will another's opinion define your essence? And if you never begin, how many more years will pass before you grant yourself permission to be a beginner? No one grows from a state of perfection. We grow from showing up, from trying, from stumbling, and from learning. That is how you befriend your shadow, not by eliminating it, but by walking with it until you both emerge into the light. Number 10. The dread of missteps and the story you wrap around them. And perfectionism always walks hand in hand with the dread of failure. In the Jungian view, a misstep has no inherent meaning. It is merely an event, a data point. Psychologically, however, failure becomes terrifying because you encase it in a narrative about your core self, that you are not enough, not worthy, fundamentally flawed. This dread often originates in early experiences where a small mistake was met with disproportionate consequence, or where love felt conditional upon getting things right. Over time, the unconscious formed a distorted equation. To be wrong is to be bad. To be wrong is to be shamed. To be wrong is to be abandoned. And so, rather than risk error, you choose immobility. Rather than move forward, you choose the safety of the known. You are not running from the event of failure itself. You are running from the crushing story of unworthiness you believe it will tell about you. The dread of missteps makes you live like a tightrope walker, eyes fixed on the abyss below, never daring to look up at the open sky. You become imprisoned in a loop of calculation. What if I fail? What if they see me? What if I am laughed at? But you forget the more liberating questions. What might become possible if I try? What part of my spirit might awaken if I dare to take this step? Jung stated, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." From this perspective, a misstep is not an end point. Each time you venture into territory you fear, you don't just learn about the task, you learn about yourself. Your capacity to adapt, to rise again, to see with clearer eyes. When you separate your inherent worth from your transient outcomes, failure is integrated into the path of growth, not seen as a threat to your existence. It is akin to learning a language. You cannot become fluent without mispronouncing words, without fumbling with grammar. But no one believes that a student who conjugates a verb incorrectly is incapable of learning. They understand that errors are the very substance of the learning process. What liberates you is not the assurance that you will never be wrong. What liberates you is the courage to say, inwardly, even if I stumble, I remain myself. And from this place, I can try again. As we near the end of this exploration, you may sense a unifying truth. What needs to be released is not your essence, but the accumulated layers that have settled upon your soul after years of living by fear, expectation, and borrowed masks. The hopeful revelation is this: you do not need to become someone entirely new to initiate change. You only need to return with gentle determination to the self you left behind in the process of growing up. Letting go is not a war against your past. It is an act of clearing the path for your future. Everything you release does not diminish you. It returns to you the spaciousness to breathe, to exist, to hear your own deepest voice. And if there is one message to carry from all we have shared, it is this: no one can walk through the new doorway for you. The frame is yours alone to cross. Now, only one question remains. Do you have the courage to take the first quiet step?